Welcome to Section 6.1, Roots and Radical Expressions for Algebra 2. Let's start this section by doing a little bit of review. We need to talk about terminology with radicals. Okay, so let's say I have the nth root of b. Well, that n, whatever root I'm doing, the value for n is called your index. And whatever expression is underneath the radical sign is called your radicand. So specifically, let's focus on square roots. If I have the square root of b, what I'm asking is what times itself, what two values can I multiply together, it's got to be the same value, gives you b. Okay? So specifically, if I have the square root of 25, well, what times itself gives me 25? And that's got to be 5. So the square root of 25 is 5. Or another way to write this is if I have 5 squared is 25, right? Well, that's equal to saying the square root of 25 is what? And we all know that to be is 5. Okay? Okay, now let's talk about the nth root. So when I say the nth root, I'm still referring to the index. And specifically, I want to refer to when the index is odd. That means the cube root, the fifth root. Whenever that occurs, then there is only one real root of b. For example, let's say you have the cube root of negative 27. Now I'm asking you what number times itself 3 times gives you negative 27? Well, we know it needs to be a negative number. Negative and a negative is a positive, but times another negative would be a negative. So think for a little bit. Maybe you'll see that negative 3 times itself 3 times is negative 27. So our answer is going to be negative 3. And we only have that one root. Okay? Another example, we're going to do the cube root of positive 27. Well, again, what number times itself 3 times gives me 27? I'm hoping that you all said 3. 3 cubed is 27. So the cube root of 27 is 3. Okay, now I know what you're asking. What happens when when we have an even index? So that would be like the square root or the fourth root or the sixth root. And b is positive, meaning b refers to the radicand, that value underneath the radical sign. So we have an even index and a positive radicand. Then there are 2 real roots of b, a negative value and a positive value. For example, let's say I have the fourth root of 16. So you're thinking, what times itself 4 times gives me 16? It's got to be a small number. 1 times itself 4 times is 1. Try 2. Does 2 work? Yes. 2 times itself 4 times would give me 16. So I have positive 2, but then I would also have negative 2. Negative 2 works as well. Okay, here's another one. If n is even, so we're still doing the square root, the fourth root, and b is negative, I have a negative radicand, then there are no real roots. For example, let's try the square root of 16. Well, what I'm asking for is what value times itself gives me negative 16? And I know you're all thinking it's got something to do with 4, because 4 times 4 is positive 16. But I want negative 16, so I know positive 4 is not going to work. What about negative 4 times negative 4? No. That also gives me a positive 16, so that can't be right either. There is no value that if I multiply it by itself will result in a negative number. So in this case, the only thing you can do is write no real solution. Or if you wrote no real roots, that would be fine too. Okay, example 1. Find all the square roots of each number. So looking at A, I want to know what is the square root of 1600ths? Or what number times itself 2 times will give me 1600ths? Well, if you think about it, you know it has something to do with 4, and I also need a decimal place, or some decimal. So try 4/10. If I square 4/10, do I get 1600? Yes, I do. So my answer is going to be 4/10. Here, for B, what value times itself 2 times will give me negative 64? And if you remember from the previous slide, we said that if your index is even, which we're doing a square root, so our index is even, and your radical, or your radicand, I'm sorry, is negative, then you have no real roots. Because there is no value that I can multiply by itself to give me a negative number. Okay, example 2. Find all the cube roots of each number. So I'm going to rewrite this as a cube root of negative 27 over 8. But what I'm really asking is, what number times itself 3 times gives me negative 27 over 8? Now what you can do when you have fractions underneath the radical is to simply do the numerator first and then do the denominator. So I really want to know, to begin with, what number times itself 3 times will give me negative 27? Oops, and I forgot to write my cubed. If you said negative 3, you are correct. Now what number times itself 3 times gives me 8? Well, hopefully you all said 2. 2 times 3 times. 2 times itself 3 times is 8. So my answer is going to be negative 3 over 2. That is the cube root of negative 27 over 8. B. B says, what is the cube root of 1? So again, what times itself 3 times gives me 1? Well, the only possible answer you could have is 1, because 1 cubed equals 1.